Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break IL, a look at speedrunning, game development, content creation, and everything in between. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for watching, listening, all that fun jazz. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's been kind of on my mind for a couple of months now, but probably even longer than that. And it's been a little bit challenging for me to articulate and try to get my thoughts down. In fact, this is actually the second time I'm recording this because the first one was just a bit too rambling. It still wasn't clear enough on what I was trying to accomplish. And I think with this one, save your speedruns. What the hell am I talking about? Okay, let me get to it. Just bear with me and go with me on this one. So in the last few months, Twitch has been making some changes to how they share revenue, pay out creators, all that kind of stuff. And that's not really the thing that's gotten me thinking about this. It started a long time ago. There have always been, sometimes I think Twitch is great and wonderful and it's awesome that we can do this live streaming thing. And I've been thankful for so many people that I've met through Twitch and streaming and on, speedrunning, all that kind of fun stuff. But at the same time, they make a lot of decisions that I don't necessarily agree with from time to time. And some of the most recent ones have really just kind of solidified some of my thinking. And I think it kind of all comes back to this, like Twitch is owned by Amazon. Amazon has this fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. They're going to maximize their profits, and oftentimes that is at the expense of its creators and its community. And so, that's one of those things that's kind of, I think, the impetus for some of my thoughts here as we're about to get to. The other thing is kind of this idea of speedrunning preservation. And one of the things, if you ever watch a summoning solve video, quite often the earliest runs of a speedrun don't have video evidence, don't have video proof, and nowadays, you wouldn't be able to submit that on a speedrun.com leaderboard. Also, there are been a lot of content creators and other people just in the community, retro speedrunning, who are working their asses off to preserve video game history. And one of the things I wanted to kind of articulate in a podcast episode was that I think we need to do this as speedrunners as well. And I know it's not possible for everyone to do this. There are costs and resources and time associated with all this. But I feel like it's important to our history for many different reasons. And I'm going to get to that in just a few minutes here, why it's important for us to preserve our history, because it's what we're doing. So bear with me. Let's go through this. And I think the first thing I'd like to talk about is why I think it's important that we preserve speedrunning history. And I think there's a couple different ways you can look at it. The first one is I know that I like preserving my own history for a couple different reasons. One, anytime I start a speedrun, I'd really try hard to record the first playthrough of that. And then each PB, I don't necessarily save all of my attempts, but I definitely save all of my PBs. And it reminds me, there's one of these cool things is tracking progress. Just if you're a stats geek or, a data geek, you can see how you progressed over time. The Lack Attack episode is one of the ones I point to quite often, where he's diligent about saving everything. And it doesn't even matter if he's only taken a second off of a time of a run, he'll still submit that PB and save his own records. And I think this is great for seeing how you've improved and, maybe analyzing your own work on. I know I've done that. I'm like, oh man, I need to work on that more than I need to work on this. And at the same time, I also think it's kind of interesting for me to go see, maybe I bumped into something or discovered something that maybe the community or that hasn't been discovered in whatever game I'm running. I say community, there are times I've started speedrunning games that don't have a community around them. So the new discovery may not be anything new. There's nobody else to share it with, just myself. But nonetheless, you never know what you might find in some of your old runs. So I think from that standpoint, it's interesting and important to record your own runs. But then there's also this kind of like bigger picture. And I've been, I'm mentioning this speedrunning history thing. And there are many runs that we don't have video evidence of from a long time ago. And first of all, it's kind of unfortunate, right? Because maybe there were strats in there that the modern generation of speedrunners don't know of or didn't quite see how these things were done. At the same time, as a history buff, I just think these are important video. They're important aspects of the history of whatever particular run we're talking about. And I'm sure people were speedrunning when these games first came out in the 80s and the 90s, games that people, retro speedrunners might take on. And that kind of stuff is just kind of lost. There may have been strats there that just don't exist because we don't have the video proof of it, and we don't have ways to look back on it and see what they did. Just recently, I just did an interview on Jedi Fallen Order with the folks who run that game, and they made a new discovery in the game that actually makes them return to a previous route they were doing a long time ago, because this new strat unlocks some things that weren't available before. And I think it highlights, those earlier runs, you never know what you might need them for, and they're a really valuable resource to the community. And so something that, preservation is important. Let's see how do we know if our current routes and our current strats are faster unless we've seen what we can before? How do we compare it to that? I know there's some things we probably take for granted nowadays, that it's gotten a lot easier to save these things to places like YouTube or stream it to Twitch and things like that, Vimeo, all these places. But it still takes us as the runner to record those and take the effort of popping them up on somewhere for our own progression or for that of the community as well. So, I always think about this, the speedrunning history thing, and this probably is just the kind of person I am, but I always like to think of what the next generation is going to do. I don't think speedrunning is going anywhere anytime soon, but there is going to be a next generation. We're already seeing it. More newer games are being run. We're seeing a game like Super Mario Brothers, the any percent category, getting optimized to such a level that at some point we may theoretically, there's a possibility we could hit what's humanly possible. Thanks to Summoning Salt for his video on that as well. And so I think that, considering the next generation is something that I always like to think of what I want to pass on to the next generation, not in my death or anything like that, but at some point I'm going to stop running certain games, and maybe I can help out the next generation that wants to try some of these games by just sharing, hey, we know these things work this way. Maybe now you can go and find something different. I could be kidding myself. I mean, I run a lot of games that not a lot of people run. So, I could be kidding myself, but you never know. And it's just a little something where we as community members can contribute in that way. I guess I like the idea of being able to contribute to the team that way. So I think the next aspect I wanted to look on at this is how can we go about capturing our runs so they're not lost? And this is where it becomes a bit of a challenge, because I know we all have different resources and things that we can afford and things that we can't afford and things like that, with stuff we already have. And so a big caveat during all of this is it's understandable that we don't all have the resources to do this. So I've kind of broken this down in some ways, and it reminds me of a panel that I did that I'm going to link in the description here that Dwango AC, Tina Hacks, and myself did about, we called it capturing and streaming gear for speedrunners. And we kind of started off with, hey, what's the cheapest way, or what's basically no resources? How can you get into capturing your runs? And some of the information there's been new improvements, new innovations that have come out since then. But the first part we almost all, and you probably have heard on this podcast if you listen to it any amount of time, is that use what you have. If let's say you have a game console and you have a cell phone, point your phone at the TV and record your gameplay that way. Another way is, let's say you only have a laptop. OBS is this amazing, powerful software that is free and open source. And so you can set up an emulator and set up OBS. And I was running OBS on BizHawk, which is, my TurboGrafx 16 emulator, but also has a bunch of other console support. And it was on a 2010 Mac. And I was doing this in 2022. I'm not kidding. I literally just got rid of that computer about 6 months ago. And you'd be surprised what you can accomplish with very little, or just the things that you have in front of you. And if you can, record the gameplay that way. Now, obviously, the next step that becomes an issue is hard drive space for all this, or storage space to begin with. And that's where things can kind of become interesting. I still work in video production. Since it's no longer my full-time day job, but I still do it as a part-time thing. And there's something we call digital asset management in video production. And that's how do you store in video production? We've got huge amount, huge files that if somebody's paying us for, we damn well better hold on to and not lose it. And so there's this kind of industry standard 3-2-1, and that is 3 copies of whatever file you've got on 2 different mediums, and I'll talk about that in place. And the one is for, oh my gosh, I've got my notes here. So bad. One is the backup offsite, which is that's ones I don't follow as much as I can, but I can give you some suggestions on how to do this. So anytime you've recorded a run and you want to keep that run, now you may want to, maybe you found a glitch on that, so you want to keep that run. Make a copy of it that isn't like on your local drive or whatever drive you were using the recording. And this could be off of cheap, you could save it onto cheap thumb drives, SD cards, and obviously the other one being a cloud storage of some sort. You may not have access to all this stuff. So some suggestions is if you're ever out and people are handing out thumb drives, hold on to it, format it. Now you've got an extra thumb drive. SD cards, maybe you used to use in your cameras or other devices that you don't no longer use, make great extra storage for something like this. And then there's the the into the cloud thing, and that could be your second form of medium. You store part of it on a hard drive, then store it again into the cloud. And there are multiple solutions. One of the things if privacy is important to you, you give up a little bit of that when you throw something on the cloud. I have found the cloud to be extremely helpful, especially as somebody who, people have paid me for video production backups and things like that. I use a service called Backblaze that just backs up everything you plug into it. It's only linked to one computer, but I don't remember what their price is nowadays, but you can back up everything. Now, this costs money, obviously, right? There are some free cloud solutions, but they're limited by storage size. So you always have to think of that. I think of, Dropbox, Box, Microsoft OneDrive, Google, Apple. I mean, Apple has, storage starting as little as $1 a month. And I don't remember, was it a gig, 50 gig? I don't remember exactly what the storage space is, but it's something to consider if you would like to use a cloud backup solution. The issue there is that you're kind of at the mercy of your internet connection, because some of these things could take a time uploading and all that kind of stuff. And that's definitely something you got to consider if you want to go with a cloud solution. But I got to tell you, a lot of times it's pretty darn reliable nowadays, and it's gotten better and better in my, since it was just 10 years ago. I've been doing video production like about 15 years now. And realistically, their cloud solutions were mailing your hard drives off to a service so they can back it up for you. It wasn't as robust as we've got nowadays, where I can literally just keep my, my desktop or my network attached storage backed up to the cloud. So some things to think about. Unfortunately, all of them come with a cost. There are some free solutions, but they are limited by space size. But something to consider if you're trying to back up your stuff. Now, let's say how do we actually record? What are some of the best ways to do? I mentioned the if you emulators, use what you have. If you want to take a step up and start recording some of your gameplay, there's nothing wrong with starting with cheaper solutions. And I talk about some of the inexpensive capture devices you might see on Amazon or eBay or something like that. I've purchased a couple of them to try them out. The little HDMI capture cards have been surprisingly decent in my experience. If you look at the reviews, some of it looks like it's a bit hit or miss, but at 10 or 15 bucks, it's like a good place to start if you actually want to start spending some money on some of this stuff. There also are some composite capture devices that can plug into a laptop or plug into a computer via USB that they're not the greatest quality. You're not going to get the highest fidelity and the highest quality, but they get the job done, which is really what's important. There are videos that I'm thankful to see, a lot of gameplay 10 years ago, 12 years ago was recorded to a VHS, and thankful that yes, that's a really low quality thing, but we get to see the progression of speedrunning, even if it's something that, it reminds me of actually living through some of this because I was alive during VHS. And I think that's a good thing. Regardless of the quality, we have it. So even if you're starting off with inexpensive capture devices, I think it's okay. I really do, just as a place to start. And then if you're finally ready to invest and you've been doing this for a while and you know it's something you're into and you want to invest some money into it, the OSSC, the retro tank, all of the scalers, and you can start RGB modding your consoles, invest in a mister. I got to tell you, since I've had the Mister, I don't use my consoles as much as I used to. And admittedly, I haven't been grinding a speed run with any sort of like regularity because of day job and life and all that kind of stuff getting in the way recently. For the past year or so, it seems like now. But when I go to play something in the 8 and 16-bit era, I almost first go to the Mister because first of all, it doesn't take up very much desk. It's right here on my desk. It takes up the size of a little tiny Raspberry Pi size thing. So but once again, costs money. It's definitely investment. And so I totally get that. There's talking about some of the software to capture your runs. OBS is the one that I always point to first, but there's also, if you've purchased an Elgato device, there's a capture software that comes with that. There are other, there's other software out there that captures that can get the job done too if you want to go that route, or if it's already something that's already on your computer because you installed something else. So the next part of this is streaming services. And one of the things that got me thinking about this recently as well is I've seen some of my friends and also other speedrunners experimenting with platforms other than Twitch. And I know speedrunners have not been just exclusive to Twitch, but it's kind of interesting to see some people who've been on Twitch for a very long time experiment with some of the other platforms. And there's not many in the streaming space. And, there's some pros and cons to all of them, but I think something that you may want to consider, or we all should consider, is diversifying the way that we upload, stream, however we post our speedruns to these platforms. And the reason I talk about diversification is that some of these platforms have taken steps in the past, and it's been at the expense of our data. And you may have remembered a few years ago, if you've been doing this for a while, when Twitch decided to basically delete highlighted VODs that may have had music that violated DRM. And the problem with something like that is that, let's say your video didn't violate DRM, but the Twitch algorithm or whatever they're using to detect this doesn't know that. The appeals process can be very challenging, and a lot of people lost their highlights, gone forever. And so there are a couple different ways you can approach this, but I think you should absolutely be ready that, once you've put your data on one of these platforms, you no longer have the control that you might when it's under your own custody. So what I mean by that is always record locally. And it's been a tough thing for me to get in the habit of. The thing that taught me was my internet connection was sucking at times, and all of a sudden OBS would crash or whatever, or would break my stream, and all of a sudden I wouldn't have a VOD anymore. I wouldn't have the recording of what I was trying to, my speed run. So I think this is a kind of a common, maybe it isn't, I don't know. But I know for me, this is, I still stream to Twitch when I'm doing speedrun attempts. And when I do PB, I highlight that stream or that attempt on Twitch. So technically there's something saved there for as long as Twitch allows me to have it there. And then I also upload it to YouTube, and that's another place. Now, YouTube may find something in violation of their terms of service at some point too. So maybe they find a reason to, or just a glitch happens and, the VOD may be deleted. But there's a chance that between my local recording, my Twitch VOD, and my YouTube VOD, at some point this recording can be found somewhere. They're not the only platforms in town. Vimeo is still around, and unfortunately, they've become I shouldn't say unfortunately, they've changed their business model for professionals. And so a lot of their services are now paid, but it's still an option. There are free services, as I've mentioned, places to use a cloud. If let's say you used Microsoft's free version, I don't know what their paid service is nowadays. Is it $6 or $7 a month or something like that? And US, by the way, I'm talking about. And you can save your videos there, and you can actually stream it. You can play it back on OneDrive's player. So while it's not something that has it's not built for a community place, where you can share it like as if it was a piece of social content, at very least you've got it there that people could view and things like that. So in fact, you could submit some of those. You could submit a OneDrive link to speedrun.com. Speedrun.com is not exclusive to YouTube or Twitch or anything like that. So nice to know that kind of thing exists, especially if you want to submit these to leaderboards. I haven't used I've used Facebook streaming a couple different times. Not the biggest fan of Facebook myself. I rarely use it as a social network anymore, like at all. So, but that is a streaming possibility if that's your thing. I hope that the big takeaway here is that you consider diversifying where you keep your media so that if you'd like to share it with the community, it's still there. Now, if you're a person who wants to monetize your content, you may want to consider some other approaches. And I still am monetized on Twitch. I'm an affiliate. And because of some of their recent changes, I used to donate most of the money that I've made on Twitch. Now I am exclusively donating all of it. And that's anywhere from like $500 to $1,000 US every year. And it's important for me to maybe try to do some good with this money. I was thinking of actually giving up my affiliate status based on some of these changes. But on the flip side, I thought, well, maybe we can do some good with that money, whatever little bit it may be. And so, I Prevent Cancer, Trevor Project, I'm big into cancer charities and foundations that support LGBTQIA plus causes. So at the very least, maybe we can do some good with it. The only reason I bring that up that is, it's okay if you want to pursue monetizing your content. It's yours. You can do whatever the hell you want to do with it. And if these are some things you want to pursue, absolutely do it. But remember that you are going to give up some control when you do this. And the more important part is that you're going to be at the whim of the platform. And this is, if there's one thing Twitch and YouTube have taught us, is that they are going to change their rules. It sometimes may feel like a moving target. And that's why diversification, I think, really becomes important until there is a way for, I also, if you're going to go down the path of monetizing your content, consider not just Twitch subs and bits or YouTube subs and joins and things like that, but really think about ways to have a direct relationship with your audience. The obvious ones nowadays are like Patreon and Ko-Fi, but there's many of them out there. And I strongly urge you to consider having that direct relationship, because you never know what Twitch or YouTube or Facebook or any of these platforms might do. There's one thing we've learned over the last, 5 years, 10 years or so now, is that things change and laws change and all these kind of things wherever you may be in the world. And so having some control over your stuff becomes more and more important. And I think I'm going to kind of leave it there with that, Chad. I could probably go out a rant for a very long time about it, but I know for me, I'm going to keep. I'm not able to monetize my YouTube channel. Not even sure I would at this time. Maybe I would, and kind of do the same thing. That I'm very fortunate to have a day job. So let's see if we could do some good with this monetization. So okay, here's where I'm going to leave this. I actually have some questions for you. And if you'd like to respond on Twitter or into the Discord or even in the comments on this YouTube channel, I'd be really interested to see, how do you capture your gameplay or your speedruns? And what are you doing at it? What's your setup? Do you have a way of doing this? Are you recording locally? Are you just recording right to Twitch? Are you just relying on YouTube or one of these other platforms to do so? I'm just curious to see what's out there, because I think there are some things I haven't considered here, but I hope that we're all talking about this, because I think, especially if you're listening to this podcast, you care about speedrunning. And I think, especially if you're like me, maybe the older I get, the more I'm into, like, how did we get where we are today? And we only know that if we have the history. That's why I think it becomes so important to record this stuff. So what platforms do you stream or post your VODs to as well? I'm curious. TikTok's a new way. And I know that you can't post, an hour-long speed run there, but maybe you're figuring out ways to use that platform. I'm curious. I don't know enough about all of these networks, so I'm curious how they're being used. And maybe you've got some ideas and better options on how to preserve speedrunning history. I've been thinking about the Video Game History Foundation we're on this quest to preserve video game history, gaming historian, all these other people who are really into the preservation side of things. If they are fortunate enough to come across Hard for Games, another one I think of, where like if they see some prototype, they instantly, how do we dump it? How do we get this? And how do we keep this? Archive.org, all of these places, that are doing this preservation type work. I feel like it's important and it's thankless. There's no money involved with it and that kind of thing. I know content creators have found a way to monetize it, but I think a lot of us feel this way about the community. How do we preserve this stuff? So I'm curious what your thoughts are. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too rambly. Like I said, this is take 2. We'll see how this one goes. Thanks so much for listening and watching. And I'm interested, if anybody's got any comment, please leave them below or pop on the Discord or Twitter. I'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff people say at the end of a video. It honestly all goes a long way to help the podcast. Thank you so much. If you want to join us on Discord, we chat mostly about food, but occasionally we do talk about the stuff that's in the podcast. The link is in the show notes or in the description. Feel free. Come on by, join us. If you want to follow on Twitter, Sequence Break PC. Sequence Break PC. I post when I go live. It's kind of not at a set time, so if you want to see the live feed of the podcast, feel free, follow there. And finally, if you want to email, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Sequencebreakpodcast.com is also where you can find the backlog of all of the episodes. It's also on YouTube as well, so feel free, join in, have some fun. Thank you so much. I will see ya in the next one.